This is the Marketing Podcast Network.
Welcome to Uncorking a Story, the podcast that introduces you to the rich world of storytellers who share their personal journeys, creative processes, and the stories behind their stories, one conversation at a time. I'm your host, Mike Carlin, and I'm thrilled to be part of your writing journey. If you're an aspiring writer, a literary enthusiast, or simply someone who believes in the transformative power of words, you've come to the right place. Every week, we'll pop the cork on the world of successful storytellers and give you a healthy pour of inspiration, insight, and empowerment. My mission is to help writers like you realize your full potential through the transformative and therapeutic power of writing. Whether you're just starting your literary voyage or looking to refine your craft, I'm here to provide you with the knowledge, inspiration, and encouragement you need to embark on your own storytelling adventure. So, are you ready to uncork your story and let your creativity flow? Uncorking a Story is about to begin. Sit back, relax, and let the transformative magic of storytelling whisk you away. Welcome to Uncorking a Story. Well, hey now, and welcome to another exciting episode of Uncorking a Story. I'm your host, Mike Carlin, and I'm so happy to have you with me as I uncork Kendra Petty's story. I want to remind you to please follow Uncorking a Story on all social media platforms, including Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and TikTok. You can find us at Uncorking a Story on all of those platforms. And just a quick note on YouTube, it's been a very powerful growth vehicle for our show. And it's also become a fun way for me to interact with the audience, as well as for fans of the show to interact with each other. So I encourage you to please subscribe to our YouTube channel by going to YouTube, searching for Uncorking a Story, and hitting that subscribe button. For you audio listeners out there, please subscribe, rate, and review Uncorking a Story wherever you get your podcast. Now, today on the show, we have an amazing story from author Kendra Petty. And as you listen to this deep and emotional conversation, you will really come to understand why Kendra chose to name her memoir, I Can't Believe I'm Not Dead. It's a very provocative title for a memoir, but you'll understand why. And I'll give you just a Cliff Notes version of it here. You know, in a very vulnerable way, she discusses the emotional and physical abuse she felt from the hands of her mother at a very young age. She talks about the trauma of losing her brother in a very violent way. And, he was very young when he died. She talks about the cult she was forced into after her mother remarried and how she broke away from that cult. And yes, even an attempt on her life by organized crime. Now, this is really the stuff that fiction writers like me have a hard time, just fathoming. That's something that this many issues can actually happen to someone in their life. But it's a true story. But all of that stuff isn't even the most amazing part of the story. The amazing part of Kendra's story is the fact that she's been able to heal from these traumatic experiences, and tells me that a big part of her healing involved the writing process for this book. Now, she's very upfront about this. She did work with a ghostwriter, but over the course of a few years, she had multiple conversations with this ghostwriter and found that while just talking about her life experiences, she started to feel better, and she started to feel that she was healing inside. She also noticed that sharing her story on podcasts like this one also had a therapeutic effect. And it's pretty amazing, right? It's pretty amazing, this power of writing. And she told me that initially she was just getting this book down on paper for her. That she didn't intend to share it with the world, and she had some very valid reasons for that. What you'll hear about in my conversation with her. But in short, she started to believe that she could help other people who have experienced similar traumas with her writing. And that fueled not only some additional healing within her, but fueled a newfound purpose in her life. So I want to remind you that my goal with Uncorking a Story is always to help make you a better writer. And today's lesson is to never forget just how powerful writing can be. It will not only impact your life, but it could impact the lives of others. So that's enough for me. Now, let's uncork Kendra Petty's story. Kendra Petty is a woman who has succeeded in an all-male industry, becoming an executive vice president at 2 firms. She's a dynamic public speaker, powerful negotiator, and deal maker. She loves bouldering and scrambling in the mountains of California, Nevada, and Arizona. A boater for many years, Kendra also loves fast cars and traveling. She joins me today on Uncorking a Story to talk about her life and memoir, I Can't Believe I'm Not Dead. Welcome to Uncorking a Story, Kendra.
Thank you so much for having me, Mike. Very excited to be here. It's an honor.
Oh, it's my honor to host you on Uncorking a Story, Kendra. I'm curious, where does your story as an author begin?
Well, my book is a memoir, so it really was a lifetime in the making, starting from birth. It's a very intense story. It takes readers through not just childhood trauma and tragedy, but really a whole cycle of a lifetime of trauma, tragedy, PTSD, heartbreak, loss, just a lot of insanity. Some things that are really very unbelievable. It's a very edge of your seat kind of read. Very quick read. It is intense, but it's a very quick read. But through my childhood and then on into my adulthood with just this very crazy life that I led. And the way it came about to put it into words on paper was also a number of years in the making. I had a lot of friends that every time I'd share a story with them, they'd say, you have to write a book, you have to write a book. And I would push back and no, I don't have time. And, who would read it anyway? But as the years went on, about 5 years ago, I hit a wall, I guess sort of mentally, emotionally with all that I had been through. And I had to figure out why my life had just been this continuous crazy cycle of trauma and tragedy. So I really sought to understand. I sought to heal, started digging in, reading, looking for ways to heal my heart, my mind, my body, my soul. And in that process, there was this voice that would not stop telling me, you have to write it down. You have to write the book. You have to write it down. And I fought it for a bit. And finally I said, fine, I'll do it. But I knew I couldn't do it on my own. I'm very busy. I travel a lot for work, have a very busy life. So I actually hired a ghostwriter to help me. And it was a 3-year process for this ghostwriter and I, a very long process, very intense. But it turned into a great product. But when I originally hired her, I did tell her, I do not want to publish this. This is all very, very personal. It makes me way too vulnerable to put everything out there. I said, I just need all this insanity documented for me, for my family, maybe for a few friends. I just need it documented. But as we went along through the process, she's a published author. She's ghostwritten a number of books that have been published. She's worked for 2 of the big publishing houses, Simon & Schuster and Random House. So she really knows her stuff. And she kept pushing me through the years to publish. And I kept pushing back. No, I don't want to publish. No, I don't want to publish. And towards the end of the 2nd year, I finally said, okay, I will think about it. By the time we were in the beginning of the 3rd year, I finally agreed to publish it. And so we got to the end of the 3 years and she helped me find a publisher and we published it about 9 months ago.
Wow. So I do want to dig into your process of working with the ghostwriter. Before I do though, you mentioned like this voice inside your head that was coming to you saying, you've got to write this down. You've got to write this down. I've heard those voices before. Where was that coming from? Where do you think that voice was coming from?
My inner spirit, I think it was part of my healing process. I honestly did not realize how healing writing the book and going through that whole process of talking about it with Jessica, my ghostwriter, again and again, so many evenings, so many weekends that we would just talk through what happened. And then we'd have more meetings and follow-up questions and we would have to dig in and then reading and rereading the book as we put it together and then editing it and re-editing it. It was 3 years of very intense, basically therapy. And so I really think it was just my inner spirit knowing that I needed to work through that process to help me heal. And even these things like this, these interviews, that's part of the healing process too. It's a continual healing process. So, the nice thing is I could have spent tens of thousands of dollars over decades on therapy. And instead I squeezed it all in a few years and I got very intensive therapy. So it was an incredible process.
Well, I will share that my first career goal was to become a therapist, and that didn't materialize the way I wanted it to. But I'm glad to hear that the conversations like this are somewhat therapeutic
Yeah,
and helpful
absolutely.
in your healing process. What can you share with us about some of the trauma that you experienced? I mean, that kind of where this story really begins.
Sure. It begins in Oklahoma. I was born on a farm in Oklahoma, raised in Oklahoma, not on the farm. It's still part of our family, but we left and moved around Texas, Arkansas, and Oklahoma as a young child. We settled in a town called Lawton, Oklahoma. It's about half an hour from the Texas border, and that's where my family still is today. Um, my mother was always very mentally unstable and had mental illness. Although back then, getting diagnosis and medication and such was not as common or easy as it is today, especially in a place like Lawton, Oklahoma. So my mother was already mentally ill, abusive, verbally, mentally, emotionally, and physically. Could not control her anger and her temper, and so was very violent. But when I was 8 and my brother was 10, he was my best friend. He was killed in an accident while we were together. We were crossing a highway, and he did not see a car coming towards him, and I did see the car, and it hit him. It was probably going about 70 miles an hour, and it was just a very violent, very gruesome death. And he died trying to protect me, trying to make sure I got across the highway safely. And he died, and I did not. And that created just a tremendous amount of strife in my family. It made my already mentally ill mother go even madder. My parents didn't get along before. They really didn't get along after that. I developed night terrors right away that lasted a lifetime, very violent night terrors that would cause me to run out of my home and my hotel room in the middle of the night and sleep. I'd wake up in strange places. That continued on into my adulthood. Through my healing process in the last 5 years, they've gotten much better. I don't have them near as often. But after my brother's death, my father left us, which made my mother even angrier. So it really just broke our family apart, the death of my brother. My mother remarried, and she married a man. She married the neighbor, her best friend's husband. Her best friend died of cancer about a year after my brother died. And so I inherited this new family with 2 new stepsisters. But through that process, my already very violent, very mentally ill mother just continued to slip further and further and deeper into the abyss of mental illness and became more violent. She used to choke me till I would black out. Just severe, violent beatings, horrible beatings, and just anger that she couldn't control. She would, if something would upset her and we're driving down the highway, she would try to jump out of the car. Did this multiple times, and just things like that. And even as she aged and got older, it even got worse as we became adults. She would act out and have these fits of rage, and neighbors would call the police, and so. My mother has just lived a very mentally tortured life. But when my mother and stepfather married, they started a church in our home that morphed into this very bizarre, very strange cult. And that led to even more abuse. Things like we weren't allowed to go to the doctor because God will heal you, more physical abuse in the name of God. So I left Oklahoma after high school at 18 and moved to New York City, determined to leave all of that behind me. So that's really a quick summation of the childhood trauma. And then that followed me into adulthood, and I experienced quite a bit of trauma in my adulthood as well.
Yeah, well, now it's very clear to me where you got the title of your book from.
Right. Well, one thing here about my adulthood.
I'm a little nervous to hear about it, but yeah, because I'm reading this introduction, and you are very successful. So I'm curious, how do we bridge that gap between this childhood, which started off very challenging with your mother and her mental illness issues. Of course, the big flashpoint being the violent death of your brother, and then of course the parents divorcing, and then marrying the neighbor, and then not that you joined a cult, but forming a cult. You're part of a cult. Well, let's jump into adulthood then. So what happens when you leave at 18?
I left and I moved to New York City. I worked 3 jobs to put myself through college. I knew I never wanted to be the typical kind of Oklahoma girl where you graduate high school, maybe you go to college, maybe you don't, you get married, you have kids, stay in Oklahoma your whole life. That was absolutely not my intent or my desire. So I knew I wanted a career. I didn't know what kind of career, but I knew I needed to go to college. I was the first person to graduate from college in my entire family. So I moved to New York, worked a lot of jobs, went to school in Manhattan. I graduated and I really just started focusing on building a career. I originally started a career in the fashion industry, didn't care for it. It really wasn't for me. But I got tired of the cold weather in New York and I left for LA. I moved to LA, which is where I started in the industry that I'm in today. 29 years ago, I started in this industry. So I've been in it a very long time and it's been very good to me. There's been some not so great things that have happened to me in it, but in general, it's been a really good career. But I moved a lot for work. The only way really, at least with the corporation that I was with at the time for the first 15 years of my career, the only way to move up the ladder was to geographically move. So I moved a lot. And I've lived all over the US, a lot of cities twice. And, that was an incredible experience, but it came with a lot of sacrifice as well, always having to say goodbye to friends and different people that I knew in cities and having to start all over with my social network. So that was tough, but it was all in the name of building my career. But I married a woman while I was in New York, I came out, realized I was gay, and I came out and really just we weren't allowed to date in Oklahoma. There was no dating. There was this cult really sequestered us from the real world. We weren't allowed to watch TV or listen to the radio, read magazines or newspapers, or associate with anyone outside of our little group. We weren't allowed to go to friends' houses. We weren't allowed to go to the doctor. It was just a very all-encompassing religion that just kept us in this bubble. So it took me some time when I moved to New York to just really understand who I was. But then I embraced it fully. I understood it. I accepted it, and began dating for a number of years. I eventually met a woman that moved from Texas to Cleveland with me, and then from Cleveland to San Francisco. In San Francisco, we got married. She had a daughter who was 7 years old, so I had a stepdaughter. But she had a hidden drug habit and was an alcoholic. And because I was raised in this bubble, I really didn't understand drugs or drug addicts or alcoholism. I wasn't exposed to any of that, and I didn't participate in any of it as an adult. So it was very confusing to me. And so I thought she just had mental illness like my mother. And I would tell her, either you're mentally ill or you're doing drugs. Either way, we need to get you help. And, it was always a fight. No, I don't need any help. I'm fine. But she was extremely physically abusive, broke my bones on a number of occasions. I have scars all over my body from her abuse. I had to have her arrested. It took me 6 years to unwind from that and finally move the girls back to Texas. And it broke my heart. It just broke my heart because I'd lived my whole adult life not wanting to get married, not wanting to have kids, really wanting to focus on my career. And then I meet this person and we end up getting married. And I wasn't real excited about getting married, but it was very important to her and I wanted to make her happy. And then once we were married, I really came to appreciate how much she appreciated family and marriage. So then I began to embrace it. And just as I was embracing it, things were falling apart. And it was a number of years of a struggle there to get out of that abusive situation. But on the heels of leaving that situation, I took the number 2 position with a corporation that owned a group of smaller companies in my industry. I oversaw several of those companies. We were spread out nationwide in a lot of different cities. And during the first year of really trying to get my feet on the ground with this corporation, I started to see things that were just very strange. There's a lot of strife within the ownership. They were always trying to fire each other or sue each other. They all hated each other. I had come from a publicly traded company where all our I's are dotted, all our T's are crossed. There's processes, and everybody's very respectful to one another. And to then go to this smaller sort of family-owned-ish there's multiple families that owned it situation with all this strife was just really unsettling to me. But I just really kept my head down, and we had acquired some companies, so I worked on merging those companies into our umbrella of companies. But as I really dug into the financials of these companies and the practices, I began to see things that I started to question, things that just did not seem above board. And it took me a little bit of time to uncover and really realize what was happening. And as I started questioning and pushing back on these processes and these procedures, things really started going sideways for me at work, just really got bad. I discovered a listening device in my office and remnants of one in my car. So I realized that they were listening to me when I was having private conversations, not thinking they were listening to me. And it just got worse from there. Once I discovered the listening devices, things just really went downhill. Sort of the pinnacle of this situation I was in was that they tried to kill me. And they put poisons in my house, in my home, in my car. I was unknowingly ingesting them, inhaling them every day, wearing them on my clothes. And I got very, very, very sick, very sick. I almost died. And from being poisoned, led to other illnesses that I had to deal with as a result of being poisoned. Graves' disease that I fought for well over a decade. I developed cancer 7.5 years after being exposed, and the gestation period for cancer when exposed to chemicals is 7 to 8 years, and I was diagnosed at 7.5 years. There's not a history of cancer in my family. So I told my friends several years after I got poisoned, I said, if I ever get cancer, it's going to be because of those poisons, never thinking I would get diagnosed with cancer, ever. But sure enough, I was diagnosed with breast cancer. I had to have a double mastectomy. I went through chemo, reconstruction. But the after effects of chemo and from being poisoned and Graves' disease and chemo, it was so hard on my body. It just wrecked my body. And so I spent so many years just really focused on my career, continuing to build my career, but on my health and trying to stay healthy and try to figure out how to break free of pain and fatigue. So it has been a very long path and a very long journey.
I don't even know where to begin asking a follow-up question just based on that. But I mean, these people who are trying to kill you, I mean, this is like something literally, we're here today to talk about your memoir. This is something out of a novel. Like, I don't even know that writers of fiction could tell a story like this and have it be believable, because it's just so much to throw at one human being.
It really is, which is why I always preface that the book is an intense read. It can be emotional for some people. It's got a happy ending. I'm not dead. That's the best happy ending. They kill one of the CEOs is dead of that firm. He did not make it. And so I feel very lucky, and part of my healing process was, writing the book, getting a daily reminder tattooed on my hand of lucky to remind me every day just how lucky I am to be alive and to be thriving in life, not just surviving. And I think that's such a big part of my message is that people get they get stuck into survival mode and just focused on surviving. And then they can't get out of that. Even once they are a survivor, they're not able to move to the next level of learning how to thrive outside of surviving and outside of all their trauma and tragedy. So in my book, I do talk about some of my healing process and take people through some of the steps I got to from moving from just surviving to thriving in life.
Yeah. I'm thinking about just the story you're sharing with me, and I do appreciate your vulnerability while sharing it. I could easily see, of course you could have been killed by, your employers, but you could have also been killed by yourself too. I mean, you could have gone, and it would have been understandable to go into your own addiction at that point, because you come from a history, your mother was mentally ill, mentally unstable. I don't know. You didn't mention any addiction issues there, but certainly that's that's the personality type that is vulnerable to such things. But, you were mentioning, your wife had addiction issues, and she very much, to me, the way you were talking about her sounded like you kind of married your mother in a way, just with the abuse that she was giving you. And I know your mother was you suffered physical and mental abuse at the hands of your mother as well. I mean, to me, your book is I can't believe I'm not dead. I can't believe you're not an addict. How did you escape? How do you think you escaped that pitfall where so many people? Because I've talked to a lot of addicts in my life, but how do you think you escaped that pitfall?
That's a good question. I think addiction is a disease that I thankfully was never touched with. I was also, I talk about this with my father, that we have a lot of mental illness in our family. There are a number of people that I call touched, if you will. And because we were so religious, there was never any drugs or alcohol in the house. So addiction was never, it was just mental illness with no addiction. But also not willing to go to the doctor and get help and get diagnosed and get medicine because, again, God will heal. So, we just lived through this life of pain and misery growing up. But I feel like, first and foremost, I was born with just this incredible inner strength, just a really strong inner strength. Second, I've always had the practice of never getting stuck in blame, never getting stuck in anger, never getting stuck in a woe is me and a feeling sorry for myself, trying to always move out of any toxic situation. And yes, as an adult, as a child, you can't help usually getting into or out of toxic situations. Once I was 18, I left and never looked back. But as an adult, certainly my ability to recognize red flags and adhere to them, and my ability to create boundaries was severely lacking, obviously, because I got into a relationship with someone and I stayed 6 years, even though I knew I needed to get out. And then the same situation with my work. As I started seeing things unfold that were not right, rather than leave, I stuck with it I was there for 3 years. And the last year was really the worst. It's when I got poisoned and got sick, and I did eventually leave. So I'm shortening my time frames of staying in toxic situations. But when I started my healing process 5 years ago, I really cleaned up my life. I removed anyone in my life that had negative attitudes, negative energy. I had been shut down for so long out of fear, living in fear, because they tried to kill me and I didn't die. So I was always afraid they were going to come back after me, looking over my shoulder, always locking all my doors, looking out the windows, looking in the rearview mirror, just always being very aware of my surroundings. I didn't let people in my home for many, many, many years. I shut down my social media. I lived in fear. I stopped making friends as I moved to different places for work. I stopped making friends. I only associated with people that I knew from before this had happened, because I knew I could trust them and that they might not be a part of this. So I really had to make a big shift 5 years ago. And so the few people, the family members and friends that I did have that were toxic, I had to start really cutting those people off, removing those people in my life. And as I made new friends, if I came to see that they had negativity and a toxic personality, I had to move away from that as well. Really, for me, selfishly, for part of my healing process.
Yeah, and I wouldn't even say selfishly. The ability to set a boundary is something that we all. I mean, I know that's something I needed to work on for years, is setting boundary around people around me who I would consider to be unhealthy.
Right.
Yet sometimes we're so like trauma bonded with other people that we, for some reason, there's a yin and yang thing happening, and we stay and we not necessarily just meaning romantic relationships. I mean, just friendships. There are some friendships that, should be, as my mother would say, 86th.
Yeah, that's true. It's true. And even family members who use some
right.
to 80. Yeah.
Right.
Even as I got older, And my mother, we had to eventually put her in a home because she just couldn't function with her mental illness. And I would go see her when I would go to Oklahoma, but I really didn't want to because it just left me feeling horrible. So I eventually even stopped that. I had to remove that from my life as well because it was just too toxic, and still is to this day.
Is she still with us? I mean, is she still alive?
She is. We had to put her in a home. It's been about 16 years, 15 years that she's been in a home because with her mental illness, once her husband passed, she just couldn't function or take care of herself anymore. But she kept getting passed around from home to home because they said, this is not what we deal with. They weren't mental institutions. Those really didn't exist anymore. And so she kept getting passed around because nobody wanted to deal with my mother. But she has been in hospice for almost 2 years now.
Wow.
They put her in hospice. It's called failure to thrive. But, she kind of goes up and down, but they haven't pulled her out of hospice, but she's still alive.
Wow. I want to dig into the writing process, and I know you were collaborating with a ghostwriter, and I think about your life story, and I know you mentioned having this voice in your head saying you've got to write it down, and this is kind of coming from deep inside you. I could also just imagine the trepidation to do so, because when you're doing so, even when you're talking about it with somebody, even if they're a stranger, it requires vulnerability, but you're also reliving it a little bit, because you're bringing it back to the top of your conscious mind versus having it sort of suppressed. And even when it's suppressed, that's not a good thing either, right? Because that leads to all sorts of nasty consequences, and that's putting it lightly. But were you nervous about starting the writing process and sort of the consulting process for the book?
I was. I don't think I realized how hard it was going to be when I started. And, part of it is because I never talked about almost any of this to almost anyone. I have friends that I've had been friends with for decades, and they read the book and they said, "Oh my God, how could we not know about all this?" And I said, "Well, I never talk about it." So I was a bit nervous, but it was really once we started digging in and I realized how much I had to talk about things that made it even harder. But for the first year, really for the almost first 2 years, there wasn't that thought about me publishing. So I didn't have that weighing on me. Once I decided to publish, then that was a whole different ballgame. It was a whole different weight on my shoulders for so many reasons. But for the first couple of years, it was just having to relive it and reread it and re-talk about it. And there are 2 stories in the book that I could not talk about. And so we put placeholders in the book and continued to work on everything else in the book. And Jessica knew what they were, but we didn't get into the details. And she kept pushing me, especially towards the end. She's like, we really got to get these stories in here. And I just couldn't bring myself to talk about them. And now that I've done so many interviews and I've talked about the book and I've done some public speaking around the book, I'm getting a bit more comfortable. But they were the story of my brother and the story of a babysitter who sexually abused me for about 3 years. And so I finally just sat down and took about a month and a half and wrote those stories myself and gave them to Jessica. And she didn't edit them any. So if they don't read that well, that's my fault. But so we put those in the placeholders in the book where they were. But so I kind of skirted around talking about some of the hardest pieces by just writing them myself.
Yeah. How would you characterize the before and after? So if we're going back 5 years, when you're beginning your healing journey to right now with the book being published, how would you characterize the before and after in your own sort of personal life?
Yeah, that's a very good question. 5 years ago, as I was kind of hitting that wall, like, as I mentioned, I had put myself in yet another bubble, was raised in a bubble, and didn't communicate with the outside world and the real world. And then after the attempted murder, I really shut down and I put myself in a bubble, and I dated some, but I really just shut down. And so 5 years later, as I've been working through this healing and spending a lot of time with energy workers and healers and a lot of meditation, breath work, and all kinds of healing practices, I feel much freer, much more open. I'm able to talk about the different things more. Before, for example, when I tried to tell my family about the the mafia style family that I worked for and what they did. And my family's all from Oklahoma, from a small town in Oklahoma, not involved in the corporate world, certainly not involved in organized crime. That's all on TV. So when I tried to explain, and I was so sick, I was very, very physically sick for such a long time from the poisons. And when I tried to tell my family, they would look at me like I was crazy. And that made me feel really bad that they couldn't understand. And it made me feel like maybe they didn't believe me. And so, we've been able through the process to have a lot of validation from people that I used to work with at that company, who helped support me emotionally and mentally during the writing of the book, and especially during the publishing of the book. So I would say it has really opened up my world to be able to communicate better, to be able to talk about things. And really now where I stand today is it's now time for me to start helping other people. And I do feel like I have that platform to be able to help people heal, to put into practice some of the things that I did so that they get out of that survival mode, because that's where I was for decades, living in just survivor mode and not thriving. And once I realized, what am I doing? Like, this is my life. This is my only life. I have got to shake this off and heal and move forward. And so that's really where I'm at today and that's such a blessing, even though I don't like to use that word because it has religious undertones to it, but it is such a blessing to really heal to that point that I feel like now I'm ready to really dig in and help people and hopefully help them heal to learn how to thrive.
I'm going to ask you a question that I can only characterize as being a little woo-woo. And that is, there is this notion out there, and I think this is easy for people who have not been through what you've been through to say, but it's something that it's a theme I'm hearing over and over and over again, which is things don't happen to you, things happen for you. And I'm curious as to how, like, a statement like that lands with you. When you look back at all of these, challenges, and that's putting it lightly, I realize, that you faced in life, can you point to like these things happening for you in a way versus happening to you?
I'm not saying that's not possible, but I don't think I'm there yet. I do believe that there are potentially, obviously living through so much childhood trauma raised the bar for me on my threshold of being able to handle more and being able to accept things that the normal person would say, this is too crazy, this is out of control, you cannot continue to be in my life. So it raises the bar for ridiculousness and abuse. And so you have a higher threshold for that. And so I think that potentially set the stage for me as an adult to be able to take more than I should and accept more because of what I'd been through. I don't think that things happened to me. I don't think there was a purpose for everything that happened to me. I just don't, because I feel like I was born very strong, and that's what got me through everything. But I don't really see a whole lot of benefit of so many of the traumatic things that I've been through. I don't feel like it's really made me who I am. I think who I was always that person that helped me survive these things. But I don't think I am the person I am because, I had an abusive mother and mental illness all around me growing up. I had a mentally ill stepsister. I had mentally ill uncles, both who were committed on my mother and father's side, who died in the institutions in their 70s. Tremendous amount of mental illness growing up. So I am very thankful for my inner strength because I really do believe that's what got me through.
And now you can, as you mentioned, use it to help other people get through what they're doing. It's an unfortunate training for you,
Absolutely.
but perhaps other people will be the beneficiary of it. So,
well, and that's really what that was the pinnacle for me deciding to publish is, I just kept thinking about all I've survived and how many times I've escaped death. And there are a number of times. There's more in the book than what we've talked about. There's even more than what's in the book. And I just kept thinking, there's got to be a reason why I'm still alive. So many times I could have died, and yet here I am. And I have just an incredible life. I have an incredible pool of friends. I have a wonderful family for the most part. I have a great career. I'm just very fortunate. So I just knew there had to be a reason why I was still here and still thriving, not stuck in my just surviving mode. And I finally decided maybe it is to share my story. Maybe my story will help people. And I've just gotten incredible feedback on the book, on how it's helped people in various stages and ways. And that's what I love. It has made the whole process worth it.
Yeah. So there's your payoff. Or part of it anyway. I mean, I know there's not a big monetary payoff when it comes to,
That's right.
It always amazes me when people say, "Oh, Mike, you've written 8 or 9 books. You must be enjoying a nice, comfortable life." I'm like, I don't know if you know how the economics of the publishing industry work that well, but
that's right. I break it down for people. When people say to me, "Oh, you're going to retire now," or "You're making a ton of money on the book," I break it down for them. I'm a numbers person. Numbers are my thing. So I'll take them through. And I said, so here's my net. So I would have to sell this many books to even make it make sense. You really do it because you love it, or there's a real purpose behind it, I think, not because it's going to make you a lot of money.
Yeah. And it sounds like you found, part of your purpose anyway in helping other people with the decision to publish the book. So that's a wonderful thing. And you mentioned reception has been positive for the book.
It has. It's been incredible. I should note that all the names have been changed. All the names of the guilty have been changed to protect the innocent. I've changed the city names. I've changed, all of that with the hopes that, no one can really track down what company it was that I worked for, because my goal in publishing this was not to out that company. It was to share my story and my experience. So as people read it, you'd have a hard time digging into where I really lived and where we really operated, because it's all been changed.
It's all been changed. Well, very good. Well, Kendra, this has been just a fascinating conversation for me. And I'm curious if people want to reach out to you and touch base. I mean, do you have? I mean, I know you want to sort of maintain part of your anonymity, I'm sure. But are you active on social media? Do you have a website you can share with the audience if they want to learn more?
Sure. You can reach out to me on my website, KendraPettyOfficial.com, or my Instagram, Kendra Petty Official, or same for the Facebook. So and I'm on LinkedIn, Kendra Petty.
All right. And my last question is always the trickiest one for some people to answer. If you could go back in time and whisper some words of advice into the younger Kendra's ears, what would you tell the younger Kendra Petty?
I guess it depends on how young I am. If it were prior to my brother's death, then I would say don't cross that highway. If it were later in life, I would say, do not take that job with that ZVL company. I named them ZVL in the book as an acronym, but do not take that job with ZVL. Those are the two things that if I could, my marriage was catastrophic, but I feel like I helped her and her daughter in certain ways, and I'm still have a relationship with the daughter, and feel very bad for my ex-wife. So that makes me sad, but I wouldn't. It'd be nice to change that, but I think if I were going to change anything and warn myself of anything, it would be don't take that job.
All right. Very good. Well, Kendra, thank you so much for stopping by Uncorking a Story and letting me uncork yours.
Thanks for listening to Uncorking a Story. If you'd like more information about today's guest or to find out more about Mike, go to uncorkingastory.com. If you enjoyed the show, please subscribe, rate, and review us at Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Tune in every week to hear Mike Carlin uncork a new story.